Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Good Shabbos.
This week's Parsha, we read about the final plagues, the last of the plagues, and we're going to focus today on one of them in particular. So I encourage you to open up to page 376 in your Chumashim. They're in front of you, the Eitz Chaim Chumashim. And we're going to look at plague number 9. I know, it's almost, I feel like it's Campfire Shabbat. Plague number 9, we love. I don't know that we can say we love plague number 9, but it was certainly effective. Verse 21 at the very bottom of the page. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Hold out your arm toward the sky, that there may be darkness upon the land of Egypt, a darkness that can be touched." Moses held out his arm towards the sky, and a thick darkness descended upon the land of Egypt for 3 days. People could not see one another, and for 3 days no one could get up from where he was. But all the Israelites enjoyed light in their dwellings. So my first question of all of this is, what is this darkness? It's obviously different than the normal darkness that we have. And we have to understand, by the way, darkness before the invention or the use of electricity was very deep, right? Once the fires went out, once your candles went out at night, we don't have street lights. We didn't have those sorts of things. You know, in the 1800s, we started to have gas street lamps, hence the gas lamp district that we have down in San Diego. But when nighttime came, it got dark, really dark. But this seems to be something that's different than that normal darkness. So I guess the question is twofold. What makes this darkness different? And what does the Torah mean here? What was the actual plague of Choshech, the plague of darkness, that made it so strong, so insidious? If we think about it, the rabbis say that as the plagues got more and more, right, as we got farther into the plagues, they got more severe. Obviously, the death of the firstborn, the 10th plague, was the most severe. But this is number 9, the penultimate. So this was one of the most severe plagues that we have. So what was it about? Anybody have any ideas? Anybody heard any interpretations about what this plague of darkness was about? Neil.
Well, the Egyptians were sun god worshiping. Now we take that away.
Okay. So Neil said the Egyptians were sun god worshiping people. They worshiped many gods, but Ra, the sun god, was on top of that pantheon. And when you take away sun, when you go into darkness, it is in essence removing that deity, removing that most the highest of deities. And then the irony obviously is that the children of Israel had light. So Adonai is more powerful because God can choose where that light will go and where that light will not go. Please. Yeah. The Israelites had a light, and so there's a huge contrast between what was happening in Goshen, right, that area where the Israelites stood, and in other places. And by the way, some of the rabbis went so far as to say that when the Israelites left, and if they went into their neighbor's house, that they had light and their neighbors still didn't, right? So it puts a different perspective on it. What else?
I think a word that really describes this, and it's very hard to explain, to even interpret it in English, but is verse 22, Choshech Afela.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I was thinking about, there's still unfortunately one hostage remaining, but during this time, we've sung Achenu, and in that prayer for the captive, it's it was not knowing. It
Yeah.
was being unknown. And I can't help that word afela.
Yeah. So Diana, I think you're right, really looks into there's two words in these verses that I think stand out. And Diana, I think you picked up on one of them. Choshech afela. Now, afela very often is used in Hebrew, can be used also as fog,
Yeah.
right? So it's you can't see, but there's a substance to it. That's why they translate it here as a thick darkness, right? There's a substance to the darkness. It's not just the absence of light, but there's something else that was there that made this darkness even more oppressive, right? Even more oppressive than just absence of light. Okay? Yeah.
I realize there's a difference between the Hebrew word and what the English translation is, but just picking up on the English translation, where it says no one could get up from where they were.
Mm-hmm.
Was. It sounds like there was an emotional
Mm.
content. It's like the despair. Or just
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this idea of no one can get up from where they were adds an emotional layer to all of this. You could argue that maybe it was so dark that you couldn't see where you were going, but okay, so you could get around. Maybe you can stumble around. Maybe you could feel your way through. Okay, we've all been in blackouts before and had to find our way to the flashlight or the candle or whatever it is. We do it, right? We do it. But for 3 days, the fact that no one could get up seems like there's an emotional layer to this darkness as well. I like that a lot. Yes.
It's gloom and doom. We associate light with everything good.
Mm-hmm.
At Hanukkah, we talk about lighting a candle in the darkness and as a metaphor. And so all this dark is the opposite.
Yeah.
People felt probably hopeless and doomed.
Yes. So we talk so much in our tradition about how light is a symbol of hope, how light is a symbol of possibility. We light Hanukkah candles during the darkest time of the year to bring that spark of possibility, that spark of hope. And here all of that was absent for the Egyptians. Sophia. Yeah, I mean, we see, we see Pharaoh's reaction to this almost immediately, right? In verse 24, Pharaoh then summoned Moses and said, "Go worship the Lord," right? Go out, worship the Lord, which is how this was phrased in the beginning, where we want to go out, we want to worship God. But leave your flocks behind, don't take everything with you, so we know you have something to come back to here. And you're right. I think all of these plagues put Pharaoh at odds with the, Joe Egyptian on the street, and this probably was a very big step in that. Milt.
It strikes me that it's beyond darkness. It's almost, it's like there's a vacuum. The light was sucked away, but even the sense of who you were, where you were, you couldn't tell up from down. Again, nature pours a vacuum. It would have been so disorienting not to be able to see, but not even to know, in essence, your right from your left, up from down.
Yeah.
Quickly.
Yeah, it's completely disorienting. I mean, for anybody who's ever been in a true sensory deprivation, environment, it's really disorienting. It's really disorienting. And by the way, I mean, there are people who understand that and use that as a means of torture, even, right? To take away the ability to tell time and to see what's up and down and to all those things that ground us, right? All those things that help us get through this world in an orderly sort of way. If they're taken away from us, it's hugely disorienting.
It was a supernatural phenomenon. You could maybe explain some of the places. Hey, there were locusts,
Right.
This was such that the world was turned upside down.
Yeah, this was, I mean, all the other ones were, natural phenomenon that sort of took place in a extreme way. Locusts, even boils, cattle disease, those are things that happen. But this darkness, well, it does happen on occasion. We call it an eclipse, right? But not for 3 days. And the rabbis actually say it was 7 days total. Even though here they say it was only for 3 days, it was 7 days, and the rabbis explain in their world why it's 7 days. But the rabbis really sort of, I wouldn't say struggle, but they come with a lot of interpretation on this verse. And the other word, other than afela, that is so unusual in this is in verse 21, right? Vayamesh choshech. It was a darkness that could be touched. A darkness that could be touched. And the rabbis really tried to dig into that understanding and figure out what it was. And so Rashi begins by saying it was a darkness that was doubled and redoubled. Shahaya kaful umikupal. So it wasn't just the normal darkness, but it was really dark darkness. I remember reading, I don't remember where it was somewhere online in one of the newspapers that I read, that they'd come up with this new color of black that was just, it is the blackest black that they've been able to come up with, right? So it's just absorbing all of the light. There's nothing left. Sometimes you look at a black and, okay, it's not quite, it's maybe a little grayish or whatever, but this is black. This idea of absorbing everything. The blackest black is kind of what I think Rashi is saying here. Shaya kaful umikufal. It was not just dark, but it was darkness that was doubled on itself. Now Ramban Nachmanides says, why could the Egyptians not move? Just because it's dark. Right? We do it all the time. Ramban describes the darkness, based on Rashi, as something that was physically thick and tangible. So the darkness, this physical darkness that was there, that was thick, was almost holding them down. They couldn't get up. It was like a heavy blanket, like one of those, I don't know, my wife likes those weighted blankets, and my daughter also. They drive me nuts. I can't sleep under all that, right? Right? It's holding me down. But it's that sense of weight that the darkness has created. He writes, Ramban continues, the darkness was not just that there was no sunlight. It was more than a nighttime darkness. It was thick darkness, meaning that a very thick mist came down from the sky. This is why God said to Moses, stretch forth your hands from the heavens. This idea of a physical sort of darkness. And a number of different rabbis come in. Bereshit Rabbah, the one of the Midrashim, says it's cosmic darkness. Right? Remember, there was a darkness that happened, or that was, before God created that initial light. On the first day, God created light, and there was light and there was darkness. That cosmic darkness on that first day is what Bereshit Rabbah says descended on Egypt. Right? So they're all trying to figure out what this is. And it wasn't until a little bit later that the rabbis started to say, well, maybe there was this emotional piece to it as well. Right? Why was this darkness so insidious? And Reb Chanoch of Alexander, who is a Hasidic rabbi in the 19th century, said that each individual was worried only about himself and looked only to save himself, not the members of his household. Thus, did not rise from under the darkness because not a single one of them succeeded in rising above the degraded spiritual level that they were caught in. So it wasn't just that there was this physical darkness, but it's how the Egyptians responded to that darkness, with selfishness, with just looking out for themselves, with not trying to help their fellow human being, right? What is one of the things to dispel, Daniel, I'll get to you in 1 second. One of the things to dispel the fear of darkness, well, having somebody with you, right? Being able to talk as you're walking through that darkness. That helps dispel the fear of darkness. And what Rabbi Hanoch is saying is that the Egyptians missed that opportunity. They were so paralyzed by this that they didn't actually help one another. And you could even make the argument that perhaps the Israelites felt, it wasn't that it was physically dark in one place and not physically dark. It may have been dark everywhere, but the Israelites had the light of the company of one another, and that maybe lifted them up. Daniel, what did you want to say? I didn't hear the last part. Hold on 1 second. That you think the light bulb, say it again? It was like black light, like a black light bulb. Is that what you're saying? I like that. I like that. Very, very cool. So the rabbis were starting, as we get into the modern age, the 20th century, we're starting to expand potentially what this darkness was. And if we look at Rabbi Lucy Dinner, she writes in the Women's Torah's commentary, freezing the Egyptians in darkness for 3 days while the Israelites enjoyed light. This 9th plague imposes a hiatus in Egyptian mastery and gives the Israelites a taste of liberation to come. So she's actually saying that this plague wasn't just for the Egyptians, it was actually for the Israelites. It was equally important that the Israelites had light, because now all of a sudden they were going to see what being released from oppression feels like. Okay? Now, I'm surprised nobody has said it yet, but the obvious connection in the modern world to this is what Rabbi Avraham Trugman talks about in the Orchards of Delight and picks up a couple of different other places. In psychological terms, the darkness represents depression, right? If we talk to people who are depressed, we actually start to see a lot of these parallels. This thick, oppressive weight on them that sometimes doesn't even let them get out of bed for days on end. It's actually something that is, in the modern world, we recognize. And perhaps when we talk about that emotional, spiritual component of all of this, that it wasn't just a physical darkness, but it was this weight of spiritual darkness, of emotional darkness, of depression, that actually hit all of the Egyptians at the same time. Yeah.
I was going to say, we're sort of looking at this in isolation, but if you go back 8 more plagues, we had the cattle disease. First we had the frogs that ate up a bunch of stuff, right? Now, they're also losing their food.
Yeah,
They lost their animals. They were diseased, they were dead. The hail decimated. Everything was just getting decimated, and now we have this darkness, and it's almost like a what's the word? Like a force like the premonition of.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you think of a movie like dun dun dun, and everything's really really dark. And
Right.
It's like you kind of know, but you do know something else is going to happen because God tells Moses.
Well,
what this is all about.
and the depression and the depression actually comes from a lot of things. It's not just the fact that all of these plagues have happened and their food is gone and they've suffered through all of these sorts of things, but they keep seeing their leader, Pharaoh, flip-flop back and forth.
And they're God. It's like they're
Right?
they're God.
of being able to say, well, go, no, go, no, back and forth. And they don't know what's going to happen. They don't know how long this is going to last. That's, I think, part of it as well. Rav Nachman talks about the fact that the evil inclination, the Yetzer Hara, is more interested in the depression following the sin than in the act of sinning itself. Right? That the moral quality or the moral peril of committing a sin, an Averah in Judaism, is less so than the turmoil that can cause in a person as they struggle with who are they, what they did, how that makes them relate to other people afterwards. And so he's leaning into this idea of the darkness as, well, this is what we've done for 400 years. We have enslaved these people. We have allowed that to go ahead. We have allowed that to be the case. We haven't stopped it. We haven't done anything. We've participated in that. And that itself is creating this moment for them. When we ask the question of why is the plague of darkness one of the most insidious or one of the strongest plagues, and you just think about it in terms of, all right, so there's no light, big deal. It doesn't make a lot of sense. But when we start to understand the layers that are on this, and that's clearly brought forward by the odd use of the Hebrew, this thick darkness, this cloudy darkness, this oppressive darkness that didn't allow for people to get up for days on end, we start to see something very, very different. And it makes us recognize that when we see people around us that are struggling with the darkness in their lives, it's serious. It's serious. It's one of the most difficult things that people can deal with. And in the same way that the Israelites were the opposite of the Egyptians said, well, everybody's in their own darkness, we don't care. The Israelites actually came together. They bound it together in their families, in their homes, as they waited for redemption. They made it through it together. So too, do we have that obligation to look around and to see when times are difficult, whether communally or whether individually for people, we as Jews have that obligation to be there for one another. Kol Yisrael Aravim Zeh Bazeh. Every Jew is responsible for one another. And it reminds us that even the smallest amount of light can brighten up the darkest room. All it takes is for us to be that spark, for us to be that light. And we can really do a lot. Shabbat Shalom.